Well, good morning, Fort Wayne. I very, very much appreciate the opportunity to come up here and speak to you. Thank you, Mayor, for that wonderful introduction. So, for those of you that follow local Indiana news, we had a really big day yesterday in Fishers. We announced $1.1 billion of investment coming to our community, but that's actually not the biggest or most exciting thing that happened yesterday. I coach my middle son. He's 4 years old. I coach his soccer team, and they're the worst team in the league. We've been beaten. We're 0-6, and we have not scored a goal yet this season. I take that back. We have scored goals in the opposite direction multiple times. And my wife signed me up to do this. I don't know anything about. Look at me. I'm not a soccer player. I don't know anything about soccer. And Wednesday nights are the nights where you go to practice. And this is after they've all been at daycare or wherever they've been. And mom and dad are tired from work. And they drop off 13 of these little monsters. And they leave the coach to their own devices to figure out how to deal with these kids. So they have not scored a goal in a game or in a scrimmage against each other yet this season. And I'm a government guy, right? So I like order. I like predictability. I like to figure out how we're going to structure these things. So I have a playbook in my head of how we're going to handle practice. And every time I go there, I wage war against the kids that are laying in the grass, and then an airplane goes by, and I lose all critical thought or attention from these folks. But last night, all of a sudden, we were playing this game. We were scrimmaging, and I was just letting them play. And a couple of these kids just started to figure it out. And all of a sudden, they bust away, and they start scoring goals. And they scored one goal after another, and then their peers saw the same thing occurring, and man, they looked like a soccer team. And that momentum was just exciting to watch. And what I realized is that there's an analogy here, if you will. As I was driving up here today, I was thinking about our community and in the transformation that we've been under over the last several years. And to be honest with you, there was a critical turning point for our community in 2008, 2009. We had been fairly complacent. We were a great bedroom community. There's no question about that. But it's important to understand the difference between what happens to you and what happens because of you. And we were a great bedroom community because of things that were happening to us. People were leaving the city, the urban core. They wanted cheap, available land to buy homes. They wanted good schools, and they were flocking to our community. Not because of something we have done, not because of the vision that we had. It was just coincidence. Well, 08, 9, and 10 happened. There's some key things that occur in that time frame for our community and many others. One, property tax reforms. So we used to, when I was like a young intern, the leaders of the town would say, hey, we built 5,000 homes last year. We built 2,000 homes. And that was our mark of economic development, how many homes we built. Well, if that was our key revenue stream prior to 2008, that was drying up under the new tax caps. The second thing that happened to us was a housing bust. We went from building 2,000 or 2,500 homes a year to building 400 homes. And the third thing was this idea that, a lot of the urban planners and the thought leaders of the day were saying the suburbs are dead. The next generation, they're never going to live in the suburbs. And so we had this kind of freak out moment where we were saying, this course that we're on, although great right now, and given the fact that I'm elected to worry about the next 30 years, not the next 3 months, what are we going to do? What decisions are we going to make to ensure that we can be successful in the long run? And at that point, we realized we had to stop worrying about what was happening to us and really start deciding what we're going to do because of our own vision and because of our own direction. So we had to figure out, well, what's our natural assets? Well, I don't have a railway. I don't have a seaport. I'm never going to be a massive manufacturing hub. I had to figure out what is the most valuable natural asset or competitive advantage that I have in my community. And lo and behold, it's actually a renewable resource. It's our people. We have really educated, well-experienced people in the corporate sector. And how can we tap into that to create organic economic activity? And so immediately we had to change our mindset to say, well, what is the infrastructure necessary to unleash that potential economic development? And that's when we started realizing that I'm not going to build a seaport. I'm not going to build railways. I'm not going to build industrial parks. I'm going to build a co-working space. I'm going to build an Internet of Things lab. And so we started off small. $200,000 budget in the basement of our library. We founded Launch Fishers in a 501c3, myself and my co-founder, John Wexler. Our goal was to have 100 members after the first year. We ended up having 200 members. After the second year, we had 400 members. We grew outside the library, and we moved to a new facility. But I'll tell you, in those early days, it was a little bit like soccer. It was a leap of faith that if you just let these folks do what they're naturally inclined to do, they're going to figure it out. And some aren't going to figure it out. They're going to fail. But that natural energy and that momentum that's occurring means the world to a community. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. So a lot of people know the story of Launch Fishers and the IoT Lab. But I don't know that everybody understands the power of that organic economic energy and what it means to your ability to attract other companies. So I want to go back to this $1.1 billion of investment that we announced yesterday. $575 million of that is in a life science company. It's an Italian firm called Stevanato. And if you drive down I-69 right now, you'll see steel going up in Fishers in a large building. That's the Italian firm. So what in the world does that large Italian firm have to do with Launch Fishers in our entrepreneurial movement? Well, a couple things. When we were thinking about during COVID how we were going to pivot our economy, what are we going to do next? We've got to keep evolving, keep adapting, keep positioning Fishers to be successful. We were thinking about life sciences, but we weren't really sure how we were going to get into that game. All of a sudden, one day I get a phone call from an attorney who's representing a pharmaceutical manufacturing company, a startup in their industry. And he said, I know this isn't really in your guys' wheelhouse because it's a different type of industry, but these folks have an entrepreneurial spirit. They're literally startups. They're venture-backed. It's a $60 million investment, but it's a startup. And I think you guys, from a culture perspective, you guys would click. So he introduces me to this firm. And these guys are, again, out of large corporations. They've started their own company. And we start talking about what it's like in Fishers and how we embrace the entrepreneur, how we have an entrepreneurial spirit, and we're ready to move at a moment's notice, and we're ready to adapt. And lo and behold, Incog Pharmaceutical decides to land in Fishers. And they invest $60 million in a facility. And one of the commitments that we have is when you're a company that wants to come to our community, you become part of our story, and we become part of your story. And so we started connecting with them and telling them about this vision that we think we can create another vertical, if you will, in our entrepreneurial movement around life sciences. And those guys call us up one day and say, hey, there's this Italian firm that we ran into, and they're interested in doing some development in Indiana. Is it all right if we connect the two of you? Well, of course, I'm like, absolutely. So we have this conversation, and shortly thereafter, the Italian firm commits to $140 million and then ultimately $500 million. And this is in a matter of 6 months. Shortly thereafter, I was sitting at my desk one day, and these guys that have been camped out at Launch Fishers over the last few years, who are also in the life sciences industry, they call me up and say, hey, one of our clients is a South Korean firm, and they're in California trying to build this building, and it makes no sense. It costs an insane amount of money. The regulatory framework is insane, and they're about ready to pull the plug. And we've been telling them about the relationship we have with you and the city and Launch Fishers, and man, would you be willing to take a meeting? So we get on a call with the South Korean firm, and in a matter of 2 months, we convinced them to not move to California, but instead to invest $150 million in the city of Fishers. And so, time and time again, I would tell you that these entrepreneurs, if you let them just play, if you let them lead, they're gonna follow you. They're gonna drive you somewhere that you had no idea you were gonna end up. And that's been an exciting journey for our community over the last 10 years, and it's really redefined the DNA of so much of who we are and what we're about. And not just externally, but internally. Within our organization, this idea of an entrepreneurial spirit can live. I unfortunately am not a person that can look at something and say, boy, I can make money on that. It's not how I'm wired. It's not how I'm meant to be. It's not my sense of purpose. But that entrepreneurial vision or spirit can live within a variety of different industries. And so within our organization, we try to really focus on the same entrepreneurial spirit that the folks that are waging their entire life savings on are doing over at Launch Fishers or the IoT Lab. And in fact, it's been really interesting to watch my own people within our organization innovate. Our police chief, when he was deputy chief, he was hanging around at Launch Fishers at the coffee shop talking about this new app that he thought might be a good idea. And so he connects up with some computer programmers that are sitting there. They actually develop a proof of concept. He develops this app and actually ends up, it gets venture backed, and he sells the app down the road, and it's a public safety app. I mean, he literally invented a new application while working for the city of Fishers and created organic economic activity. Our fire chief recently partnered with our Internet of Things lab to create a location device that goes on every fireman so that when they're in a fire, you can triangulate their location. So today, if you're ever by a fire, you hear all that beeping. It's literally just a device that says this fireman hasn't moved in a while. You might check on him. And so all you hear is this loud beeping, and you got to go to where the beep is. This new device that the firemen came up with the partnership at the IoT Lab, literally when a fire chief or a battalion chief shows up on the scene, they would be able to say, well, that fireman isn't moving, and he's in the second floor in the back left corner. We need to go get him. That was a device that was a partnership between our fire department and our IoT lab. And I just think those types of things are so interesting and so fun to work on, and it really creates an environment that's exciting and dynamic. Going back to this $1.1 billion of investment, one of the announcements was the Andretti global headquarters. So Michael Andretti and the family are building a new global headquarters for their racing team. Now, Fishers does not have a racetrack. We're not at the Speedway. So why is Michael Andretti announcing a $200 million investment in the city of Fishers? Well, that relationship started a long time ago. His daughter, Marissa Andretti, who works on the research and development side of the Andretti family, she had spent several visits at our IoT lab working with our technology team and brainstorming about different opportunities to work together. And so there again, there's a connection back to these larger developments and investments in the city of Fishers. Earlier this year, FormStack, the largest venture capital investment in the state of Indiana's history, $470 million. FormStack's a Fishers company today. Why is it a Fishers company today? Because John Wexler, the co-founder of Launch Fishers, was also one of the founders of FormStack. And we convinced them that Fishers was the right home for them to be at. So I guess, what I would emphasize for you today is the impact of focusing on entrepreneurship lives so far beyond just that, well, did that entrepreneur succeed or not? Did that entrepreneur succeed or not? It is the collective, and it's the momentum and the energy and the social capital that you gain from that ecosystem existing in your community that means so much. And you have to invest in it, and you have to have a leap of faith. And the other thing that is really hard for government is you got to let go. You got to let the entrepreneurs lead it. I'll tell you what, John Wexler and I, we co-founded it. We're yin and yang. If he was standing up here, John's a wild man. I don't understand his thought process. I see risk where he sees opportunity, and we've had plenty of aggressive discourse. I'll never forget the first time he came to me, he said, look, Scott, we got to get these treadmill desks, and we got to get a kegerator for the facility. And I said, John, no, that's insane. We can't do that. That is ridiculous. And his arms would flail up, and he goes, you government bureaucrat, and blah, 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 blah. Well, we were both right. We were coming at it from two different lenses. And so as you guys think about it, as you plot your course, perfecting that relationship between the resources and the political leadership that is required to execute on this and the entrepreneurs who are passionate and who can lead the way is really, really important. If that breaks down, if it becomes too bureaucratic, it will die. Entrepreneurs can sniff out government programs pretty quickly, and they're not big fans of it. It will die of its own weight. If you allow entrepreneurs to go try to do this on their own without the support and the resources of government, I think it struggles as well. So that partnership is really, really important. And the last thing I will tell you, and I want to be cognizant of everyone's time here, is don't discount what you guys already have going on. I look to Fort Wayne often as a model of collaboration. You know, I'm from central Indiana where the egos are bigger than the populations. And we do not have the history or the tradition of working together like all of you do. And I know that there's difficulties with that, but I have actually traveled up here and met with your teams before to try to understand how a region can work collectively together. And central Indiana is by far well behind where this region is when it comes to having a common vision, when it comes to sitting around the table, even if we disagree sometimes, but working together collectively to try to accomplish something. So I'm actually really optimistic, as I heard the introduction today, I'm really optimistic that if this group decides to point in a particular direction, that you're going to be able to marshal your collective resources towards something pretty extraordinary. And the outcomes, I think, will well eclipse anything that any of you could possibly imagine, and will send you in different directions. I'll leave you with this one final story. So in Fishers, when I was running for office the first time, I would go into all these living rooms and I'd have these conversations with families, and I'd say, well, what do you like about Fishers? And they would tell me, good schools, low taxes, public safety. So what do you don't like about Fishers? Traffic was always one of them, but everybody says that. Second one was, I just wish we had more restaurants. I wish we had more culinary opportunities. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I don't understand the connection, but okay, people want different and better restaurants. And then, lo and behold, and I think this is a really important takeaway today, when I was recruiting companies, it used to be they wanted to be near interstates. Then it was, well, I wanted to have walkability for my employees. I want them to be able to have trails and things. Now, when I recruit companies, it's, well, where are the places to eat nearby? Is there interesting culinary opportunities for people to eat? I'm like, how did that become an economic development issue? But it is. So if we look at that, when we looked at that, okay, we're going to do something about this. When we created the district, we made that culinary focus, and in our economic development agreement, we said, you know what, we're going to replicate what we've done at Launch Fishers and the IoT Lab, and we're going to create a culinary accelerator. We're going to create an environment where people who have a passion around food can come in and pursue their culinary passions. So we've had several restaurants launch out of there. Well, lo and behold, here comes Kelsey Murphy. And if any of you are MasterChef fans, this woman is from Fishers. She's a home cook, and she wins Gordon Ramsay's MasterChef. I can't remember what season it was, like season 13 or 14. And imagine that talent that's been unlocked in our community we didn't even know was there. Well, now Kelsey has a restaurant in our restaurant incubator. Again, we're driving towards the natural, renewable asset that we have in Fishers that is the most precious, and that is our people. And we're going to continue to do that over and over and over again, because we have seen for the last 5 to 7 years that that is clearly a path forward for economic progress in our city, and I think very much it is the same case here in Greater Fort Wayne. So with that, I thank you for the opportunity to speak and look forward to our panel discussion.